In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I command you to leave this vessel.
The alert on my dashboard wasn't audible, it was visual. A simple red line connecting 2 points on the global map that should never communicate. It was 2:12 a.m. on August 28, 2024. I was alone on the night shift, monitoring seismic fluctuations to predict instability in gas pipeline routes. But what appeared on the main screen defied every geological model I'd studied in 30 years of my career. The first point blinked in Iraq, on the dry banks of the Euphrates River, in a region suffering the worst drought in decades. The second point blinked in Antarctica, in Wilkes Land, buried under 3 kilometers of solid ice. The distance between them is over 13,000 kilometers. The response time between the origin signal in Iraq and the response in Antarctica was 0.04 seconds. That isn't seismic velocity. Shockwaves take time to travel through the Earth's crust. That was a direct electrical signal, a trigger pull. I froze the image. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The thermal reading of Antarctica, which should have been a flat line of absolute cold, began to rise. It wasn't a gradual warming, it was a vertical spike. Something down there, something gigantic that had been dormant in the dark and cold, had just fired up its engines, or worse, had just opened its eyes. I felt a chill run up my spine, not because of what I was seeing, but because I knew that kind of synchronicity was impossible in nature. That was coordinated. My name is Arthur Vance. I'm 54 years old and I am, or was, a senior geospatial intelligence analyst for Stratos Global, a private firm that sells risk data to insurers and governments. I'm not an internet conspiracy theorist. I'm the guy paid to look at satellite photos and tell a multinational corporation if it's safe to build a dam or if the ground is going to give way. My life is based on data, rocks, and boring predictions. I am a man of routines. I live in a small apartment near Arlington, drive a 5-year-old car, and have insomnia issues that made me perfect for the graveyard shift, the so-called ghost shift. No one likes these hours because nothing happens. You sit in a dark room with the AC blasting, drinking bad coffee, and staring at monitors showing a sleeping world. I liked it. I liked the silence and the sense of control. But on that night in August, my invisible man routine was shattered. I wasn't looking for ancient mysteries. I was just monitoring erosion on the banks of the Euphrates for an environmental impact report. I was good at what I did because I noticed patterns where others saw noise, and the pattern I saw that night destroyed my ability to sleep forever. I was just a geology bureaucrat until the moment I saw the Earth function like a machine rather than a planet. The first rupture happened when I zoomed in on the satellite image of the Euphrates area. The river had receded drastically in recent weeks, exposing the cracked mudbed. But in Sector 4, near an uncatalogued ancient ruin, the mud had collapsed. There was a hole, a perfectly square entrance that water had covered for millennia. It didn't look like a natural cave. The edges were too straight. The thermal sensor indicated that a heat pulse exited that hole exactly 2 seconds before the response in Antarctica. The temperature at the site spiked from 30 degrees to 800 degrees in a millisecond, then returned to normal. Like a camera flash, I thought it was a methane gas explosion, common in dry riverbeds. I tried to classify it as a natural event in the system, but the system rejected the classification. The pattern analysis software, which we use to identify underground nuclear tests, flagged the event as artificial. The error code was structured frequency anomaly. The pulse wasn't chaos, it was a transmission. I looked at the raw data and saw the waveform signature. It was clean, 7 identical peaks, Someone or something had sent an "I am open" message from that hole in Iraq, and I knew with mounting terror that the drought hadn't caused this by accident. The water acted as an insulator. Without the water, the circuit closed. The institutional silence was immediate and disturbing. At 3:30 a.m., I called the NSA duty officer who had a direct link with our firm. It's standard protocol for high-energy events. The phone rang once and was answered, but it wasn't the usual sleepy voice. It was a metallic voice, clear and alert. I started reporting the thermal anomaly in the Euphrates and the correlation with Antarctica. Before I could finish the sentence about Wilkes Land, the voice cut me off. It said they were already aware of the sensor calibration exercise and that I should discard the data as a simulated test. I froze. We hadn't been warned of any tests, and tests don't generate physical heat readable by passive infrared, I argued. I said the reading from Antarctica showed mass displacement under the ice. The voice changed tone. It became lower, more menacing. It told me to focus on Eastern European gas pipelines and forget the Southern Hemisphere if I wanted to keep my security clearance. The line went dead. My screen flickered. The file containing the image of the hole in the Euphrates was corrupted right before my eyes. Pixel by pixel, the image turned grey. They weren't just ignoring it, they were erasing the record in real time. The sense of suppression was total. I was in an electronically locked room with a secret they were scrubbing while I was still reading it. But I had made an administrative error that ended up saving me or condemning me. I had printed the spectrogram of the sound captured by the hydrophones in Antarctica before calling the NSA. The paper was still in the printer tray, warm. When I picked up the sheet and looked at the visual representation of the sound that came from beneath the ice, my blood ran cold. Spectrograms transform sound into images. Natural noises look like clouds or blurs. Voices look like jagged lines. What I held in my hand was neither. The frequency emitted by the anomaly in Antarctica formed a sharp design on the graph. It was a curve, turning up at the ends with vertical dashes in the middle. It looked like a smile, a wide smile, full of teeth. That wasn't pareidolia, where we see faces in clouds. That was intentional geometry in sound. The thing that woke up down there emitted a frequency that drew a smile on the monitors of anyone listening. It was a taunt. I cross-referenced the depth data. The signal source was moving upward, 3 kilometers of ice, and it was rising at 10 meters per minute. The heat it generated was melting a path. It wasn't a machine powering up. It was something biological and colossal, stretching itself. The real fear began when I tried to leave the room to get a coffee and think. My badge didn't open the door. The reader light turned red. I tried again. Access denied. The phone on my desk rang. It wasn't the internal line. It was an external call, unknown number. I answered, my hand shaking so much I almost dropped the receiver. "Arthur, don't leave the building. They're in the parking lot." The voice was a woman's, whispered, rapid. She hung up. I ran to the window and looked through the blinds. There was a black SUV parked right behind my car. 2 men were standing there, looking up at the second floor, looking at my window. I understood the personal risk in that second. They weren't going to fire me. They were going to ensure I never spoke about the hole in the river and the smile in the ice. That synchronicity was a secret on an existential level. I took the paper with the spectrogram, folded it, and tucked it inside my sock, against my ankle. It was the only physical proof I had. I tried to back up the server data to a personal cloud, but the connection was physically cut. The building's internet went down. I was trapped, with the truth burning against my ankle and 2 executioners waiting outside. The partial revelation came from my own memory. I remembered an old report from 1998 I'd read out of curiosity about passive containment structures. The theory was that ancient civilizations or previous intelligences didn't use electronic locks. They used nature. The weight of water, atmospheric pressure. The Euphrates River didn't dry up just because of the climate. The drought was the code. The river water functioned as a weight, a pressure key that kept the hole closed. When the level dropped beyond a certain critical point, the mechanism unlocked, the signal was sent. Antarctica answered, "It isn't mysticism, it's mechanics. Whatever is frozen down there isn't a religious demon, it's a physical entity that was locked away." And the locking system just failed. The tension exploded in my mind when I realized the smile on the spectrogram stopped rising. It stopped because it hit the surface of the crust, just beneath the superficial ice layer. It's waiting. What started in Iraq was just the warning that the cell is open. I managed to leave the building by pulling the manual fire alarm in the hallway, which automatically unlocks the doors by federal law. I blended in with the cleaning crew evacuating and left through the back, leaving my car and my life behind. I never went back to my apartment. Today I live out of short-term rentals, paying in cash. I follow the news obsessively. The media talks about extreme drought in the Middle East and record iceberg calving in Antarctica. They call it climate change. I call it an escape. The iceberg that broke off last week was the exact shape of the area I saw heating up. The global containment system failed, the Euphrates dried up, and the Guardian of the South woke up. And he smiled. I don't know how much time we have, but I know the era of silence is over. They are trying to hide it, but how do you hide a giant that just broke its chains? If you want to keep receiving these updates before the internet is scrubbed again, subscribe to the channel now. Comment down below, what city are you watching from? I want to map how far this message is reaching. The clock is ticking.